This is Via Voices, the podcast that brings you insights from the champions of international education. I'm your host, Brooke Roberts, and together we'll uncover the stories behind impactful global learning experiences and the professionals who make them possible. Amir Reza believes that big global challenges like climate change can't be solved with borders, but by people working together across them.
In a divided world, in a world in which we need more opportunities for people to humanize one another, we're either attacking or undersourcing the solutions to overcome that.
As Dean of Global Education at Babson College and former president of AIEA, Amir shares what he's learned from a career dedicated to building global connections and shaping the next generation of entrepreneurial leaders. Hello, Amir.
Hi, Brooke.
Welcome to the Via Voices podcast.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, first of all, I have to say thank you to AIEA for letting us do this here at the conference and being open to this kind of weird idea. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about why AIEA said yes? Why does Claire and the board that seems
We
cool.
love weird ideas. That's the truth of it, that here we are at a conference in which we continue to elevate the field, hopefully through leadership. And that leadership oftentimes tells our students to go beyond their comfort zone and to push the envelope. So if we don't have creative people like you and your organization coming to us and saying, let's do something different. Let's not have just a booth. We want to do an interview. But in another way, you're memorializing some of the leaders in the field. And I think that also helps us tell our story as an organization. And ultimately, in the introduction this morning, when I launched the conference, I shared part of the reason I think people should come to AIEA is to engage with the industry leaders in the field who facilitate and elevate our work, because we can't do it alone, right? If we did it alone, we'd still be doing paper.
Yeah. Oh, man. No offense to anybody out there still using paper. But it's time.
No.
It's time to move off paper.
Yes.
Well, that's a great segue. I want to hear more about you, your story. How did you get into the world of international education as your career? What brought you here?
Well, it was a cloudy day. No. So, it is a very personal story, as it is for so many of us. I grew up on 4 continents. I grew up during revolution and war in Iran. And during the Iran-Iraq war. And why I'm saying that is because war creates some of the most awful dehumanization of others. And I got to experience that as a child. And at the age of 12, I left home. I lived in Switzerland. I lived in Niger in West Africa, and ultimately came to the New England region of the U.S., and I juxtaposed that against my undergraduate years at the University of Maine, where I was president of International Student Association. And at any one point, you can imagine I was at a table seated with 4 or 5 different nationalities represented. And at those tables, we got into some of the heated debates about geopolitics. And what was profound for me is that at the end of the day, the humanity at that table in the room was greater than any differences that may have had from an opinion perspective, from how we saw our worldviews. And that was such an important juxtaposition against what I experienced as a child and during war. So when I thought about my career at that moment, I thought, this is something I want to contribute to. How do I do it? And I started to then learn, there's this whole field where I guess there are people who work and get paid to, work towards student mobility. Yeah. There's something there. So I began to work with ESL students as a coordinator of Intensive English Institute at the University of Maine. Did a master's in student development and higher education. And my first job outside of that master's was actually at Babson College as an international student and scholar advisor. And I was so passionate about this, and also so passionate because I had been an international student on F1 visa for a long time. Yeah. And that's really what brought me to it. And the journey began that way.
Yeah. I feel like I've met a lot of people who are SIOs who also were international students. And I feel like the 2 stories I've heard are they had great support. There was a mentor, somebody when they went, to college abroad that really helped them and, really imprinted on them. Or they've told me, they just did not help. It wasn't a great support service, and I wanted to do something better for my students. So it sounds like you had a really great experience at Maine.
I had a very great experience. There are some amazing people at the University of Maine. I mean, honestly, if it was not for this woman, Holly Chase, who gave me a full tuition scholarship ride as an international student, I doubt I'd be sitting here.
Your role at Babson is actually quite interesting. Obviously, you have the global, the traditional global kind of oversight. But you also have oversight over sort of an entrepreneurial program. Tell me about that part, and how do you bring the global to that specific learning?
Yeah, I say like there are two sides of the same coin for me at a place like Babson, right? And so if we think about almost any of us as senior international officers or international education leaders, it would be wrong for us to make internationalization the end for that institution. Each institution has its own, I think, end in its own mission. So the idea is, how do we bring internationalization to achieve its mission? And that's when we're successful. So for Babson, it's been ranked the #1 school in entrepreneurship for 31 consecutive years. And so for me to go tell the president or the board of trustees that, let's abandon entrepreneurship and internationalization is where it's at. Even though that feels good. They'd be like, maybe go away. You're fired, right? So I had to think about, how does internationalization elevate entrepreneurship education? And how can I convince stakeholders that without internationalization, perhaps we can't be the best entrepreneurship school, right? And so out of that came lots of different initiatives. But with this Babson Academy for the Advancement of Global Entrepreneur Learning, we launched it in 2019. And I was asked to lead it as the dean, in addition to being Dean of Global Education, as you mentioned. And what we're trying to do is three things. One is to provide access to how Babson does entrepreneurship education, because many deans, provosts, rectors, ministries of higher education knock on our door and they say, how are you #1? Why are you #1? And so it's access. Second, we think that the methodology we've pioneered is relevant to any discipline, including international education. And so how can we inspire learners and educators that this is a methodology that's important in our world today? And third, even though we're #1, we have to be humble that we don't know how it works in all contexts. So if we can be a convener and connector. So what we have under that umbrella, Brooke, is we have programs and opportunities for professors from all around the world and all around the U.S. to fine-tune their entrepreneurial education pedagogy. We have opportunities in research. We have opportunities for learners of other institutions. One of the things I'm most proud of right now is our Babson Collaborative, which is a consortium of 44 universities in 31 countries, all geared towards entrepreneurship education. But where the international comes in is it creates a multilateral engagement. So as opposed to me having an MOU with Waseda University in Japan, Waseda University, as a member of this, might actually engage with a Chilean university that's also in the network. And in fact, I just held a webinar on Wednesday last week or Tuesday, and it was to help the entrepreneurship professors from across these institutions understand what is COIL. And so to help them bring COIL to the consortium, because it's ripe for that, right? And they were all they had, many of them, lack of familiarity. And so what we're going to do is use this platform to hold, if you will, a kind of a speed dating webinar where professors from around the world can spend about 5 minutes with each other, share syllabi, what makes them excited, and see if we could find some matches, and then we coil away.
Coil away. Well, that's a really good segue, because I want to talk about technology. And obviously to run all of these operations, all these programs, to make all of these different things happen, to your point with the webinar and any COIL programs. I mean, what kind of technology have you been an early adopter of or embraced at Babson to facilitate this work?
I mean, there are so many, honestly, that it's hard to put my finger on one of them, but maybe I will give you one example.
Please.
gamification, especially for Gen Z, is critical if we're going to be relevant as educators, that we can't teach entrepreneurship through the lens of lecture or not even case studies. And so there are some faculty who have developed some great games. So I worked along with our instructional technology team and a world-renowned professor, Heidi Neck, and we've developed something called the Babson Mindset game.
Okay.
And so we worked for months to bring this to fruition. And now any professor from any institution can get the mindset game. It comes with excellent teaching notes, and you can embed that. And so I would love it if professors think about adopting this as the introductory session of an entrepreneurship course, because it helps the learners in a really fun way play a game.
Yeah.
Especially Gen Zers, that's virtual in nature.
Yeah.
And then decipher or unpack why this game is relevant to distinguishing between what we might call a managerial thinking way and acting, or an entrepreneurial thought and action.
Okay.
And why those things are not, it's a false dichotomy. You need both.
Yeah.
But it helps accentuate the fact that entrepreneurial thinking and action is relevant to almost any field. And so this piece of technology, before that, we were using literally puzzle pieces, so jigsaw puzzles, and then quilt pieces.
Okay.
Right? So we've taken that to a high tech, right?
Yeah.
And it's now available, and we're seeing professors from around the country and around the world adopt it, and we are using it. So last February, we were in Mumbai, and that was our beta. So we tested it with something like, let's say, 40 students in Mumbai, and the energy level, the just noise level was just way up.
That's so cool.
And when you're engaged, you learn.
Yeah.
So that's just one example.
There's a lot we can learn in more traditional international ed, right? Working with students coming in or going out, gamifying the experience, whether it's the logistics of it, and all the paperwork, or the learning of it. So
or a session that we do here.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Next year, you and me, we're going to gamify a session and see how everybody likes it.
We'll work on that.
Yeah, we'll make it happen. I feel like we'll actually do it, though. I feel like between you and me, yeah.
Why not?
So, we have a lot of challenges, changes happening right now in our space, impacted by a lot of decisions being made at the political level. And I'm curious if there's a specific challenge that you're kind of seeing coming down.
I would say what I'm most concerned about at the moment is the way in which higher education, and as an extension, international higher education, is under attack in many ways. And we are being undermined in terms of resources, when in fact, we know empirically, historically, with plenty of evidence that this is what we need. I would go back to kind of my introduction, why I got into the field, is in the divided world, in a world in which we need more opportunities for people to humanize one another, we're either attacking or undersourcing the solutions to overcome that. So I worry about it from the perspective of humanity. It's that on that scale. Because things like, let's say, climate change, they don't stop at the border because we build a wall or because we have different immigration policies. They require that the kind of collaboration that we know good practices in international education have elevated, have made a reality. We see keynote speakers at our conferences and others who clearly outline that for us, right? That international education is not the only solution, but it is one of those key pieces where we're planting seeds, and we know with empirical evidence that a lot of that. And so that doesn't mean the rest of the world is also going down this path. I think it's a particular US. But because we have such a large role to play in that space, it both, I think, damages the overall growth, right? And it's not about competition, it's about collaboration. But it also, I am now someone who is a US citizen. My kids have grown up, were born here and grew up here, and I care about the US. And I genuinely worry about the future and our ability to be able to continue to attract some of the best, brightest, and give opportunities for U.S. students to engage with the world in which they have a really complex understanding so that they can continue to lead, right?
Well, I think for me, it's always interesting because, like with the State Department, a lot of the scholarship funding, at least, is frozen at the moment of recording this. And so we just don't know if it's ever going to be unfrozen, if it'll ever come back in a meaningful way. But as we all know, is that our numbers were already low. We were already like scraping by to try to get students abroad, or getting students to come to the United States, post pandemic, and scared of other things happening in our country. And then I just think we've kind of been cut off at our knees in a lot of ways sometimes, which can feel a little depressing. How do you stay hopeful?
Well, because despair is not at all helpful, and it never accomplished anything. So, I have lived through many different ups and downs, right? My family is still in Iran for the large part. We lived through revolution, war. There have been ups and downs. I didn't get a chance to see my family for 14 years in one stint. I draw on strength from those times as when I encounter difficulty and say, we can do this. And if you're thinking about it, the history of international education, sometimes in our data points, it looks like a nice linear growth. It's never like that, right? It's a zigzag.
Yeah. If you zoom in, you can see
people before us have had to overcome challenges like, censorship, challenges that we see today where people are being asked to perhaps not engage with certain parts of the world or elevate certain communities. Those challenges are not, I don't think, for the first time coming at us. And I think we can draw strength from those people whose shoulders we stand on because they did the hard work. And now the hard work, if we don't do it today, people in 5 years, the Brooke Roberts of tomorrow will not be having these interviews, right?
Yeah.
And we want to continue to do that. So I don't despair.
Yeah.
I don't have rose-colored glasses on to say it'll all be okay. But it's going to require a lot of resilience, a lot of inspiration, a lot of hard work on the part of all of us. And more than anything, and I shared this morning in the opening remarks, unity on our parts. Because we don't always agree on everything, and we don't have to.
Yeah.
But these are fundamental issues, right? Like if we don't actually advocate for the things that we know have helped the field, like the funding that has not just helped us, it has helped the United States, it has helped humanity.
Yeah. I think I get inspiration out of focusing on what I know I can impact. So like our work at VIA, I know that when offices use our product, they're more efficient, they can reach more students, and it can help drive our mission forward, even if we're hitting some road bumps along the way. And so that would be my advice to people is focus on the work you are doing. That's the student in front of you right now. And they could be, the next Amir who's you changed my life, And
it's the fundamentals. You're saying go back to the fundamentals of why are we doing it? What do we do that we know is tried and true and works well, and keep at it.
Yeah. I want to lighten it up a little bit. That was heavy for a second there, which is not like us at all.
But hey, we said we'd bring our professional, serious selves.
We said we'd try. Okay, I want to talk about something really fun, data.
Okay.
We're very passionate about data at VIA, making sure that our partners have access to their data. It's accurate, clear, that they can make very informed decisions about the data that they have about their operations. Can you give me an example, recently where you've used a data point to shore up support of what you do at Babson?
Yeah. I think I can be a data geek.
Okay.
Right.
Love it.
So I can sit there and look at pie charts and analyze and think about what if we got this and we put it up against that. So for me, data oftentimes tells a story about your past. It can't predict the future, but it can certainly tell you the assumptions that you had were either way off or right on track, right? So it becomes critical. And it tells, it paints a picture that's truth. And so it's weird. So one of the things that we did with the Babson Academy, because we're relatively new, right? We launched in 2019, then we had the whole COVID thing. Right. So you're like, were those real years or fake years or
fake
media?
Years. Those are definitely fake.
Right? So we just put together, I should say, I give credit to my team, a really good dashboard. And that dashboard is important because we get fire drill questions from, let's say there's a trustee meeting coming. So how many educators in how many countries did we touch? How many learners?
Yeah.
And by the way, at Babson Academy, we're now doing youth work too, work with like educators in secondary. So we need to really be able to dice data so that we can tell our story in the moment, right? It can't be that give me a week or give me 3 days.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do with that is to anticipate all the different questions that might come at us, and then reverse engineer, like what would be the dashboard so that at any one click, this pops up and you say yes. We're still, it's an iterative process. Yeah. So that's one clear one.
That's awesome.
Another one related to international education is our International Student Scholar Services team. They create an annual report that's all about data. And many of our community, that becomes, especially those data geeks like myself, one of our favorite reports, right? Because you start to see the depth and breadth of our reach for education, because that's really what it's about. But the data helps you tell this story so that I can stand up in front of a group of people, be like, we have 94 countries represented. So that means perhaps certainly we have a lot of students from China and India like everybody else, but we have so many students that ones and twos from other countries. And that tells a story about our global community and why it's important to continue to recruit and engage. Right?
Yeah, that's great. I want to see this dashboard sometime. I want to see a little sneak peek of it. That
Happy
sounds really
to
cool.
share.
We do similar things with VIA. We have a dashboard tool where people can create their own dashboards. So maybe we need to do a little mind meld and see what kind of data we need to be helping them pull for sure.
Yeah, I'll get the right people in the room too who can show off the data.
Well, I mean, I'm a data geek too. So this is why we're friends. Okay. Just a couple more questions. They're more rapid fire.
Okay.
As rapid fire as we're capable of being. I want to know what's the most recent book you've read and how has it influenced how you see the world?
Yeah. So there's a book by Reza Aslan. It's about Howard Baskerville. I think the title is something along the lines of Howard Baskerville is an American martyr in Persia.
Oh, okay.
And so Howard Baskerville essentially was this missionary who went to Iran at the turn of last century, so around 1900. And he believes so much in humanity of all and democracy and freedom for all people that he decides to join the local in northwestern Iran, the revolution, in the fight for freedom of people.
Okay.
And he dies there as like a 19 or 20-year-old, maybe 21, right? And the book essentially gives you a really beautiful story of his commitment to humanity and what he did in this international stage and how he adopted Iran as his place, right? And he gave his life for the freedom of people in a whole different land. And so why that's important to me is obviously my connection to Iran, but also the story of international education. Oftentimes, we make our own the other by traveling there, by integrating, by becoming part of that community. And that, I think, is a tragic yet beautiful story of what he did.
That's great. I've never heard of that. So adding it to my list.
Yeah, there's a Baskerville Institute in Utah.
Okay.
It's about human-to-human connection.
You did a deep dive on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And well, one of my mentors is the executive director.
Oh, so, okay. Yeah. Very cool. Okay, last question. You are president of AIEA. You obviously have this really cool job at Babson. You've had a really interesting career. What advice would you give somebody who wants to kind of be you when they grow up, so to speak. They want to have a leadership role at an institution in international. Maybe they want to get involved in, membership organizations like AIEA. What's a piece of advice you'd give them?
I'll give the same advice I give myself first. I shared with you, do something you're a little scared of. So when somebody gives you an opportunity and you say, no, I'm an introvert. I don't know if I can do that. Just do it.
Yeah.
Push yourself, because that's how you're going to be at that edge of your comfort zone and grow. Secondly, our careers, if I look back, I just shared with you linearly, like this is my linear. It does not look like that. A 26-year-old Amir that started at Babson College did not sit there and say, someday I'll be president of AIEA. I didn't even know what AIEA was at the time, or I'll be dean, or it never looks that way. Yeah. So looking backward, it does. But what's important is take the opportunities that are given to you, do your best, and push yourself. Do things you're a little bit scared of.
I feel like there's a challenge in here for us to give the listeners. There's something here I feel like we need to, if you're listening to this episode, I'll do it too. You can do it. We'll go on LinkedIn and you say, this is what everybody sees. It's the linear path. And then in the next section you say, but this is what it actually looks like. And it's the windy road, curvy.
And failures.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Right.
So I encourage everybody to go post a little bit about what you see, but what actually happened.
You learn more from failures than you do from successes in some ways.
Yeah, 1,000%. Like dropping a bunch of glasses in the middle of a
heard
conference.
that.
Thank
Hope
you so
everybody's
much.
okay.
Yeah, I know. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you to you, AIEA, for letting us do this here and being open to new ideas. And hopefully everybody loves it.
Thank you and to your team. Honestly, we would not be here if we didn't have the support.